What is up? Our Look Inside series here at No Pun Intended continues. So this is episode 28. We only have 5 teams left. We're just about getting into August. Actually, when this episode airs, it will be August. Fantasy drafts are right around the corner. In this episode, we are going to break down the Detroit Lions, the players we love, the players we hate, though I don't know if there will be any players we hate, but basically just give you our fantasy take on everything there is to know about the Detroit Lions. It's going to be a look inside. Let's get into it. What is up? Episode 28 of the No Pun Intended Look Inside series. I am your host, Ryan Weisse. No Joe Zollo this week. He is a very busy man for the month of August. But Josh Hudson is here with me. Josh, how are you doing, my friend?
Excited to talk about the Lions and how I don't think they're going to be near the same team as they were last year.
Yeah, I made the joke in the intro of players we hate. Josh, you and I have kind of went back and forth, and I feel like you're still relatively down on them. I don't think that I am, so it's going to be interesting to hear how we argue on this episode, if there's going to be any arguments. But when you look at the Lions, it's funny. I'm doing a article I always do for Football Guys where I'm breaking down the changes of every team for the NFL offseason. It's my welcome back to fantasy football. It's probably available right now on Football Guys if you guys want to go check it out. But anyway, when I wrote about the Lions, Josh, when I got there, no players have changed, but there was still a major change. Yeah, I'd say there was still a major change that we need to talk about. The Lions were great last year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. 15-2. Obviously, they weren't able to get it done in the playoffs, which is why we're talking about them now and not in the last 2 episodes. Dan Campbell is back as the head coach. However, Ben Johnson is gone. John Morton is the new offensive coordinator, play caller. He was the passing game coordinator for Denver for the last 2 seasons, and I believe he was with Detroit before that while Ben Johnson was there. But the fact of the matter is, Josh, he was either with Ben Johnson, who called plays, or with Sean Payton, who called plays. We don't know anything about John Morton, and that's what greatly changes up this team.
Yeah, I mean, he's had 2 opportunities prior to this to call plays. The first time was at USC in college.
Yeah.
And those were absolute trash USC teams.
Great.
And the next time he got an opportunity to become an offensive coordinator was 2017 with the Jets. And I don't need to say anything else after that. But he, after that lone year calling plays with the Jets, he wasn't employed. And now he gets an opportunity as a turning 56 years old in September to now get handed the best offense that he's ever been handed. Yet, again, soon to be a 56-year-old offensive coordinator. Like, this is truly his last opportunity to get a chance to be a play caller in the NFL. And people think that this offense isn't going to skip a beat.
Yeah.
You have not been successful up until this point, and you've been in NFL coaching circles since you were 33 years old. That's all I need to know when I'm looking at a play caller. I'm sorry, guys.
And we're going to talk more about the play caller and the team here in just a second. Josh, I'm gonna buck the show sheet here, and I'm actually going to throw up our Gridiron Goddess promo, because as we move into the month of August, it is the Women of Fantasy Football month here at Club Fantasy, and that's going to look a little bit different for this August, Josh. But the one thing I did want to have you talk about really quick before we move on, first and foremost, if you guys are looking for very cool merch, make sure you go to thegridirongoddess.com. You can use promo code WOFF, WOFF, and get 15% off of the merch. And Josh, there's some special merch for things that we have going on right now. But more importantly, we're going to have some raffles going on during the month of August that folks need to be aware of, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So if you're familiar with anything that we do at Club Fantasy FFL, you know about Women of Fantasy Football. Yeah. We have our the Gods and Goddesses of Fantasy Football charity tournament that's currently ongoing. Drafts are going on right now. Yes. And we have merch exclusive for this tournament that you can find at thegridirongoddess.com. Susan, who runs the website, she's become a pretty good friend of mine over the last couple of years. Great woman in the industry. She does a lot of introductory to fantasy football content to get more women involved in playing fantasy football. And we're working on a Women of Fantasy Football collection that will be on her website. So it'll be exclusive to the gridirongoddess.com. A lot of fun stuff that we're working on there. You can get hats, koozies, all different kinds of swag, wall art. I mean, it's a lot of really cool stuff that she puts together. And it's all a way to support our WAF Galvanized Scholarship Fund. So a portion of the proceeds of any of the shirts that you buy for the tournament will go towards that scholarship fund. And then for the month of August, we're going to be raffling off a signed Nico Collins jersey. So if you go to womenoffantasyfootball.com, you can, buy your raffle tickets. They're $5 tickets, and we'll be giving the jersey away at the end of August. And all the proceeds of that will also benefit the WAF Galvanized Scholarship Fund.
So there you guys go. Check out our website, womenoffantasyfootball.com. Check out thegridirongoddess.com for all of your merch needs. And if you are so inclined, throw a like on this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Drop in the comments what your thoughts on the Detroit Lions are. And Josh, as we move on, let's talk about this starting lineup for the Detroit Lions. Because as I mentioned, it's the same starting lineup for the Detroit Lions for last year. They have made no changes. There's the wide receiver 5 as a rookie, so I guess I shouldn't say no changes. But however, their starting QB is going to be Jared Goff. He's going off the boards as the QB 15. RB1 is Jahmyr Gibbs, and for some folks, he's the RB1 in fantasy football. He's going off the board as the RB3 right now. David Montgomery, who had a little bit of a rough season last year, he's going off the boards as the RB25. Amon-Ra St. Brown is going off as the wide receiver 7. He'll lead this team in targets this year. Jamison Williams is a controversial figure. He's going to go off as the wide receiver 25 in fantasy drafts. Tim Patrick is this team's wide receiver 3, and this is where the fall off happens. As I mentioned, Jamison Williams is the wide receiver 25. Tim Patrick is the wide receiver 126. This is a team that heavily leans on its stars. Khalif Raymond is going to be the wide receiver 4. He's going off as wide receiver 166. Isaac Tesla is going off the boards as the wide receiver 95. He's on the depth chart as the wide receiver 5. This is rookie fever at its finest. Most people have no idea who Isaac Tesla is. I will completely admit, when he was drafted, he was not on my board as a rookie wide receiver. Had no idea who this kid was.
And they took him in the 3rd round too.
Yeah, that was wild. Yeah. Well, they've done this 2 years in a row because they took Sion Vaki as a running back / corner in the 4th round last year. So I think personally, Tesla is going to be the next Vaki, where he's a special teams guy that they saw something, Dan Campbell saw something he liked, and is probably not going to be much of a fantasy figure. Sam Laporta is the starting tight end. He is going off the boards as the tight end 4 now, Josh, which feels a little earlier than he was going off earlier this season. On our website right now, there will be an article by our good friend Drew Metcalf covering Sam Laporta. So if you guys are looking for more details on Laporta, and I'll be honest, I have not talked to Drew in ages. I have no idea which direction he's going to go with this, because I know Josh and I don't love him as the tight end 4. Maybe Drew does. Check out the article, find out. It's being written as we speak, and it'll be published when this article or when this episode is available. Josh, you've kind of already talked about the offensive coordinator, John Morton, taking over. What does that do for your thoughts on the Detroit offense as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect some similarities to what they've run the past 3 years with Ben Johnson. But you also need to kind of sprinkle in some of the Sean Payton influence. That's where, John Morton came from the last couple of years. And when you look at a team that has the kind of weapons that Detroit has from a system like Sean Payton, where Sean Payton is going to spread the football around. He's going to take advantage of matchups, right? That is what this offense can be, right? I mean, They've spent years accumulating so much talent. And, you started with Amon-Ra St. Brown, who broke out as a rookie and a second-year player. You bring in, you draft Jahmyr Gibbs in the 1st round. You trade up and draft Jamison Williams in the 1st round. You bring in David Montgomery to offer, now again, Sean Payton, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, right? 100%. What do you have here with Gibbs and Montgomery? It's the same kind of concept.
Literally the same concept.
And now you have a guy at tight end in Sam Laporta who can be a red zone threat. He can be a threat between the 20s. You have so many pieces on this offense to work with that it truly makes you think, is this going to be a year where Amon-Ra St. Brown sees 140 targets? Because all Dan Campbell is doing is hyping up Jameson Williams. What was he doing last year heading into training camp in the season? He was hyping up Jameson Williams.
Yeah.
That was why I was out on Sam Laporta last year. Because, hey, look, when Dan Campbell talks, you listen. He's not going to be somebody that's going to blow smoke up your ass.
Yeah.
If they want to get Jameson Williams the football, they're going to get Jameson Williams the football. He had over 100 targets last year. And what happened to Sam Laporta? He did not repeat as a tight end 1 because he didn't score as many touchdowns. He finished as a tight end 6. So now what are they doing again? They're hyping up Jameson Williams.
They are.
So are they going to continue to take targets away from Sam Laporta? Are they going to take targets away from your first round running back, Jahmyr Gibbs? Where are those targets coming from? Because I promise you, they're not throwing the football more.
And that's such a good point. And that's kind of where I was going to go with it is I've been back and forth on how to project this team. And I do have them down in passing targets, up in rushing attempts from last year, but about the same as what they did in 2023. Back in 2023, Laporta was obvious there. Jameson Williams was a non-factor. So you can't apples to apples compare it because obviously Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery essentially did the same shit in 2023 that they did in 2024. It's just Montgomery was hurt last year, so Gibbs got a lot more targets. I don't think we're going to see Gibbs regress back to 2023 numbers. If anything, I think we see a slight regression from David Montgomery. He's getting up there. I think they're going to keep feeding Gibbs. The biggest question is the one you've kind of tiptoed around, and I guess it's probably just going to lead into what you're about to talk about here, is if JMO is going to be more involved, who is paying for it? And you brought up, could it be Sam Laporta? But it's like, how much more can they continue to take from Sam Laporta? So then Amon-Ra St. Brown was only at 141 targets last year. And I'll be the first to admit, I'm projecting him as like a 150 target guy. He played all 17 games last season. So this again could be just looking back too much into 2023 where he was a 10 target per game guy. But again, they had no wide receiver 2 and certainly not a wide receiver 2 that the coach loves the way he seems to love Jameson Williams. So there's a very good chance, Josh, that I and maybe a lot of others are over projecting Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think that's going to perfectly lead into, let's talk Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is the player that you've highlighted for us to talk about today.
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this by saying that Amon-Ra St. Brown stats out currently, before I do my next projection scrub, as my wide receiver 9. So I am a little bit lower on him as consensus. Right now, he's going off as the wide receiver 7. I mean, you're talking minimal difference here, right? I have him at 143 targets. That's still, based on my projections, about a 25% target share. And I have them a little higher in pass attempts per game than what they had last year and a little lower on rush attempts per game from last year.
Oh, so
they ran the ball over 31 times last year per game. That I don't think is going to happen this year because, again, it's a completely different play caller. It's somebody that doesn't have a ton of experience calling plays, right? Ben Johnson, for as good as this offense was, it took him 3 years to get to that point.
Yeah.
Right? So let's not forget about that when we're talking about what is the potential upside of this Lions offense. Now, all of that said, let's look at Amon-Ra St. Brown because we talked about this a lot in, our Monday recap show and even going into our Tuesday waiver wire show and our Wednesday preview show.
We got into some
fights with Amon-Ra St. Brown, right?
Yeah.
And for all of those fights, Amon-Ra St. Brown finished as the wide receiver 3 last year. He was the wide receiver 5 in points per game. But did you know that in 7 of those 17 games, he had less than 10 yards per reception?
Yeah. Definitely not.
He had only 4 100-yard games last year. 4.
Wow, that's a lot. That's not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, he set a career high in touchdowns last year. He had 12 touchdowns. He's had 22 touchdowns over his last 2 seasons. But when you have a guy that finished as the wide receiver 3, I got to ask, Ryan, why is he going lower than that this year?
I think it's a mistrust issue with Ben Johnson being gone. It's a mistrust issue that the world perpetually has with Jared Goff. But I feel like just like Dan Campbell, The fantasy world is obsessed with Jameson Williams. Like everybody wants him to be.
That is really what it boils down to, right? Like we're talking about all this hype. Jameson Williams. Those targets are coming from somewhere. Okay. Jameson Williams has a very different skill set than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a in between the tens kind of wide receiver. He had an 8.3 ADOT last year. Solid. I would say not great when you're talking about big play wide receivers, but also too, like Amon-Ra St. Brown had the second lowest targets of his young career last year. And I don't like at the height of Amon-Ra St. Brown, there was no Jameson Williams.
Exactly.
There was no Sam Laporta. There really was no Jahmyr Gibbs, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And now these guys are really entering the primes of their careers. And you've got, and I'll like, I get it. Amon-Ra St. Brown is still, this is year 5 for him. It's not like he's some old veteran wide receiver, right? But when you look at what he does best, you also have Sam Laporta that operates in that same area of the field. Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield, same area of the field. And those guys can create mismatches the way that Amon-Ra St. Brown can't.
Yeah.
And Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs are so much more explosive. So when you look at Morton coming in and coming from this Sean Payton style of offense where they want to spread the football around, where when Sean Payton deviated from that scheme, it was when he hyper-targeted Michael Thomas and they didn't have anybody else.
That's
right.
True.
It was Alvin Kamara. But even Alvin Kamara wasn't a 130 target running back. It was 100 targets, 80 catches, right?
Yeah.
If you say that that's the ceiling for Jahmyr Gibbs, I'm all for it.
Obviously.
But Michael Thomas never had a Jameson Williams and a Sam Laporta next to him.
Exactly.
But when you look at the years of like a Marquez Colston, who did he have? He had
Jimmy
deep
Graham.
play guys that could take pressure off of him and he could just be a possession guy.
And Jimmy Graham.
Well, Jimmy Graham being the touchdown monster, which,
yeah.
Hey, how many touchdowns did Sam Laporta have in his rookie season, right?
Exactly. Yeah, Laporta has shown a proficiency in the red zone that he certainly didn't show the last season.
And this is what I'm getting at here. So now you have a different play caller with a different mentality from Ben Johnson. And yet people just want to say, well, Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I say this all the time. Play callers will tell you who they are. John Morton is a virtual unknown, but the last 2 years, he was not with Ben Johnson.
He was with
Sean Payton. It's a very different offense, very different scheme, slightly different philosophy. But they have young guys that are extremely explosive. They want to get these guys the ball in space and let them do the things that they do. Jameson Williams will be a big play threat. Amon-Ra St. Brown is not a big play threat.
I was going to say, because even if you look back to Denver, he had only really Cortland Sutton, but Cortland Sutton, neither of these two wide receivers matches up to what Cortland Sutton is. But if you're comparing the games, J-Mo is closer to Cortland Sutton than Amon-Ra St. Brown is, certainly. So
yeah. So now let's take the touchdown regression into account. He had 12 touchdowns last year, little over 1,200 yards. If Jared Goff doesn't have Ben Johnson in his ear, is he throwing 30 touchdowns?
Yeah. Do we trust Jared Goff or do we trust
Ben? Because I don't think he is.
Yeah.
Right. So if he's not throwing for 30 or more touchdowns, expect some touchdown regression for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Right. So now we're talking about maybe an 1,200 yard receiver with 8 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, maybe.
Yeah.
That's not a top 10 wide receiver.
Certainly not.
Terry McLaurin had over 1,000 yards and 13 touchdowns and still wasn't even top 15 in points per game last year.
Yeah, certainly not the first round pick that Amon-Ra St. Brown is currently costing. So.
And that's my point. Is like when you're taking these guys at their height, like you want to see, all right, where does the upside? We know that Amon-Ra St. Brown is a very good wide receiver. We know what he's done in the past. We know that that's the ceiling, right? But we haven't really seen the floor yet. And that floor could be bad.
Yeah.
When you look at an inexperienced play caller, a quarterback that typically excels when he has an offensive mastermind in his ear, and John Morton is not that.
Yeah.
So we could see a lot of high turnover Jared Goff, a very high variance Jared Goff. And if there's a high variance Jared Goff, the reliable targets are going to be the ones that, to me, take the biggest hit, not the big play type of threats in the offense.
Yeah, it's such a good point because of the stats you've already brought up. If Amon-Ra St. Brown only managed 4 100-yard games last year, and we're expecting, I think the world expects worse Jared Goff, but we're not expecting worse Amon-Ra St. Brown. It does not compute. It's not.
And let's also not forget, he had an 81.6 catch percent last year,
which is just out of this world.
That is stupid. Like, if you're not expecting some level of regression on that and the touchdowns with the big change in offensive coordinator, not to sound arrogant, but you're playing fantasy football wrong. I'm just being serious.
Yeah.
And look, I will eat the crow if I'm wrong. I will 100%. I will admit it.
I was just saying, you and I had this battle last year, and obviously Amon-Ra, I mean, it's one of those cases where it was almost Cole Kmet's tight end 10 season, where we were right, but we were wrong at the same time. You were kind of right. Your stats tell a story about Amon-Ra that doesn't line up with his end of year ranking. And again, I think the wildest thing, Josh, is when I was looking at the stats, the fact that he was only targeted 141 times last year. In our heads, Amon-Ra St. Brown is this 10 target per game guy. That's not what the numbers bear out. The numbers bear out 8 targets per game, and he's going to need to.
Which is still good. I want to preface that. Like, that is still, like, that's elite level wide receiver production, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's fantastic. And again, 22 touchdowns the last 2 years. He is a reliable target for Jared Goff. They signed him to a $30 million a year extension. They believe in what Amon-Ra St. Brown brings to this offense. But all they want to do is big plays.
Yeah.
It's big plays, right? It's big plays. It's mismatches, taking advantage of that stuff. When you look at everybody else on this offense, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the only option that doesn't command mismatches.
Yeah. Except in the red zone. Amon-Ra St. Brown plays that kind of like big slot role. But again, you also have Sam Laporta. So there are other things that.
And this is a team that runs in the red zone.
You bring up an interesting point. Normally I would push back because everybody knows I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. Normally I would push back, but the point that you can take away from this is, of all the first round wide receivers, and I consider Amon-Ra St. Brown a back end first round wide receiver, he probably has the most question marks and red flags. And that's a fair point to make. And in the first round, the goal is to minimize risk. And I don't know if Amon-Ra does that.
Yeah, I mean, for as much as I like the potential of Nico Collins, for as much as I like the potential of Brian Thomas Jr., the excitement and the upside there is just so much more polarizing to me than what Amon-Ra St. Brown can potentially bring. So then it becomes, all right, what's my floor?
Yeah.
And honest to God, like, if you told me the bottom fell out of Amon-Ra St. Brown, it wouldn't surprise me, even if he's fully healthy. If the bottom fell out on BTJ or Nico Collins, I guarantee you it's probably because of injury.
Yeah, the scary part is, and this would be like my last point with this is if the passing volume goes down, and I know we don't necessarily 100% believe that's going to be the case. We do expect the rushing value to go down because it's not Ben Johnson's hyper efficient offense. But if the passing volume goes down, if those targets for Amon-Ra go down into the 130s, or God forbid the 120s, this is a very different receiver than everybody's projecting. So,
yep.
I looked at this team, and Laporta would have been interesting. There's nothing interesting about talking about Jared Goff. Obviously, Jameson Williams would have been interesting, but I had a feeling we'd be spending a lot of time talking JMO during your Amon-Ra St. Brown's thing, and I was right. So I wanted to talk about David Montgomery. There's nothing to say about Jahmyr Gibbs. He's going off the board as the RB3. If you took him as the RB1, nobody would argue with you. Josh, I don't think there's a negative voice in the fantasy industry about Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, we just kind of accept that he's going to be, even if he isn't what we saw last year, if he's what we saw in 2023, that was great. This is a team that is hyper efficient when it comes to scoring rushing touchdowns. Obviously, does that leave with Ben Johnson leaving? But my question is, how are they going to work David Montgomery back into the fold? David Montgomery only missed 3 games last year. He was very good. In 14 games, David Montgomery was still the RB18. But what we got a glimpse of what Jahmyr Gibbs is when he's the only back. And it's great. And I don't see a world where they move away from that. And you brought up the Saints comparison because of all the Sean Payton connections. In the Saints comparison, there was the Bruiser and then there was Alvin Kamara. I don't think they're going to do that in Detroit because Jahmyr Gibbs is just so good. And that's no slight on Alvin Kamara. But what Jahmyr Gibbs did last year, 250 carries, 1,400 yards, 5.6 yards per carry. He didn't do the volume, but those are the numbers that Saquon Barkley was putting up. Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Jahmyr Gibbs were and Bucky Irving were the only people above 200 carries and 5 yards per carry. But then Gibbs brings a passing game aspect in at 52 catches last year, 4 touchdowns. And again, I'm supposed to be talking about David Montgomery here, but what I'm getting at is Jahmyr Gibbs was so good, you're not putting the genie back in the bottle. And so Josh is 100% right that rushing attempts are going to go down on this team. I think they're going to go down for Gibbs. I don't think he's going to see 250 carries. Monty in 14 games last year saw 185. I think he's going to be down from that number, and that doesn't even count the games missed. But more importantly, Josh, and this is the point I wanted to make with David Montgomery, it goes back to your point. Amon-Ra St. Brown is likely to get his 140 targets. We expect J-Mo to be well over 100 targets with the way they're hyping him up. Sam Laporta is going to be a part of this offense, probably above 80 targets, and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be above 60 targets. That does not leave a large piece of the pie left for David Montgomery, and that, I think, is going to hurt his fantasy value. As a runner, I think David Montgomery is going to be fine. I do think he takes a back seat to Jahmyr Gibbs. But in the receiving game, he caught 36 of 38 balls last year.
That's not happening this year.
The targets aren't happening. But more importantly, he's good, but he's not that good. The year before, he caught 16 of 24. Like, he's maybe an 80% guy on his best day. He's certainly not a 95% guy, Josh. And so you're dealing with this situation where you can't expect the receiving output from David Montgomery, and that's going to bump him outside of the top 20. And that's exactly where he's being drafted. And I'll be honest, I have him ranked exactly where he's being drafted. My problem is, as we get closer to the draft season, the name recognition could boost David Montgomery up. And I'm even starting to see people hype David Montgomery as a sleeper. And I'll be honest, Josh, I just don't see it.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, before my next scrub, he stats out as my RB 29. But I also have him at 31 targets, and I think I'm going to pull from that because I'm not seeing the usage. Like, he always finds a way to get hurt and miss 2, 3, 4 games. Yeah. So like, I have him at 189 carries and I have Gibbs at 220. So like, I still have him kind of, fairly even in that aspect, but like, he's never been a high yards per carry guy. He's not near as explosive as Jahmyr Gibbs is. So he's so reliant on touchdowns, and Jahmyr Gibbs proved last year that honestly he's better at those short yardage touchdowns than David Montgomery is. So like, really, what purpose does he serve outside of, Gibbs is only a 200-pound back. We don't want to use him too much in between the tackles running, right? Like, we want to get him in space and let him do what he does well. So like, he's a very unsexy pick that if he scores 10 or more touchdowns, he's absolutely going to pay off on ADP. But the likelihood of that happening, I feel like, is just diminishing by the season and really by the minute, truthfully.
Yeah, I mean, as backs get older, they fall off, plain and simple. And you're absolutely right, Josh. This could be a situation where we see Monty on first down in setups where Gibbs is on the field with him, because Gibbs can line up in that slot and they don't have a third wide receiver they need to worry about. So this could be a situation where Monty's on the field on first down, and if they're going to run up the middle, they give it to Monty. Otherwise, they're going to pass. This could be a situation where Monty's in from the 20 to the 5, but then once you get inside the green zone, the cash zone, the money zone, they're going to get the ball to Gibbs and Laporta versus Monty, their 28-year-old running back. And like I said, I think the world fell in love with David Montgomery 2 years ago, and we're hesitant to move on, basically.
Yep, I agree.
When we move on with this team, Josh, we're looking at the camp battles to watch. And as I mentioned, the entire team is back. So there's no hyper interesting camp battle to watch. You have it earmarked as the wide receiver 3, who probably barely matters, but
they really don't, in all honesty.
Yeah. It's Tim Patrick, a club fantasy favorite, certainly, returning from back-to-back ACL tears. Khalif Raymond, who has been a Detroit staple for years, and then this Isaac Tesla, who nobody knows. But again, for fantasy purposes, no one's really paying attention to this. I think your underrated storyline, and we've already touched on it multiple times, so we won't spend too much time on it, is how many targets does Jameson Williams steal from Amon-Ra St. Brown? Hopefully, to you folks, we've painted a story that Jameson Williams may actually be underrated. And Josh, I know I've been reading the reports lately. I know I've had to move JMO up my rankings. I've notoriously been someone who is low on Jameson Williams because he is the boom bust guy, and they're a little bit harder to trust in fantasy.
Yeah, like I said, and this is going to change when I do my scrub, but like I have Amon-Ra at 143 and I have Jameson at 106 in terms of targets. I have Laporte at 90. So I'm probably going to end up moving this around. And I think Jameson Williams is going to be a lot closer to 120 targets than maybe people want to admit. Yeah. And I would not be surprised if Amon-Ra St. Brown is under 140 targets this year, which again, like when you factor that in with potential touchdown regression, there's a chance that Amon-Ra doesn't finish as a top 12 wide receiver this year.
Yep. And that moves us on to our best bets on this show. We went to our sports books of choice and tried to find some bets that we found interesting. If you guys want to throw a little money on this, do so responsibly. Or if you want to throw parlays together, and you're not going to be surprised by the two players that Josh and I picked that we are most confident to bet on this season. Josh, go ahead and get us started.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Jameson. Jahmyr Gibbs at 1,500 plus rushing yards. It's like plus 650 on DraftKings. I say this loosely. Is there a world where Jahmyr Gibbs can hit this? 100%. Absolutely. I mean, he had 250 carries last year and over 1,400 yards. For him to hit this number, he's likely going to need more carries than that.
I said they have to give up on David Montgomery
they really have to give up on David Montgomery. But exactly what we said earlier, Montgomery seemingly misses games every single year.
Yeah. And
when you give the football to Jahmyr Gibbs, great things tend to happen.
Yeah.
So I'm not opposed to, like a $10 bet on something like this or a high variance, parlay for like a $10 kind of thing. And if it hits, like, great. He only stats out at about 1,164 yards for me. But again, I only have him at 220 carries. But if you're able to do over 1,400 yards on 250 carries, there's a world where this can happen.
It's what, 4 or what? No,
it is what Joe would say, burning money. Don't get me wrong, but
yeah. I don't hate it just because I think he is the second best running back in the NFL right now. No offense to the older guys, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry. I think he and Bijan are just do something different that other folks can't. Take a look out at there. Josh didn't find one, but if you see a total yards bet for Jahmyr Gibbs, that might be one to latch on to as well, because he's still going to be heavily involved in the passing game. And Josh, I went with Jameson Williams over 1,000 yards. Look, he crossed 1,000 yards last year on 91 targets, if I remember correctly. It's paying plus 175, so you're almost tripling your money here. Why not? It's a player that the team wants to get heavily involved. It's a player that averages 17 yards a catch, so he doesn't need a ton of targets to get this done. And you and I both think his target numbers go up this season. I have him at 111 targets, crossing this number by 50 yards, 10,048. So if I can triple my money on something that I think is more likely than not to happen, I'm going to do so. It's a plus money bet when it comes to JMO.
Agreed. I like it.
There we go, folks. That is going to wrap up the look inside on the Detroit Lions. We only have 4 of these episodes left. A reminder, there is an article on our website right now breaking down Sam Laporta. And again, I can't wait to read it. I get to edit these articles, so I get to read it before you do. I can't wait to find out if Drew likes Sam Laporta or hates Sam Laporta or is somewhere in between. But that is going to wrap up this episode. Next up, we are going to break down the Washington Commanders for you. And again, we're down to the last 4 teams. We're down to the AFC and NFC championship teams, Josh. It's going to be an absolute blast as we get into draft season. It's time to start drafting for those home leagues. It's going to be a very, very fun season. Look Inside continues next with the Washington Commanders. We'll see you then.